We're live. Okay. Hello. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jay LaPlante. I'm the director of the Miami Film Festival and co-director of programming, and I'm joined here today with the director, Kim Snyder, from the film Us Kids. So welcome, Kim.
Thank you so much, Jay, and thanks to the festival. It's so great to be here virtually after almost making it in that last week back in when the world fell apart there.
That's right. Yeah, and I wanted to start off by saying that I'm really thrilled to be sitting down and having this conversation with you, Kim, because this is a 10-month journey from when we found out about the film, when it was announced in Sundance, and our documentary programmer Tom Powers, really went after the film, and we had programmed it for the Miami Film Festival, and you were right, we were just one day away from being able to screen, but safety first, and I'm just happy.
It was the right decision.
Yeah. So Kim, I want to, I know that from reading interviews that I've seen with you online, you were involved in another film, or you were exploring another film, and you were in Tallahassee at the time of Parkdale. And how do you pivot so quickly to be able to make a film about something that's unfolding in such an immediate way? I mean, you need funders, producers, you get a whole army of people. How do you pivot so quickly and jump in and make this film? It was happening so quickly. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Well, it's true. I had made the film Newtown back in 2016 about that tragic shooting that we all remember with the school children in Connecticut. And I thought I was sort of done with that subject. I happened into that as well, and it happens a lot to us filmmakers that the story kind of finds you. And I was onto something different that was really looking at Florida as we speak in these crazy days, and it's still a project that's ongoing called As Goes Florida, and the rest of that sentence, As Goes the Nation. And I was just following a number of themes of how interesting I find Florida and how important, and how every race comes down to 1%, and everything always comes down to Florida. So I was in Tallahassee on the steps of the Capitol with the mayor at that time filming, and Parkland happened. And, before that, I had been heartbroken when Pulse happened and all the other shootings in Vegas. But it's not like I was looking to make another film about a mass shooting. And in fact, Us Kids is not a film about a mass shooting in the end, or even really about Parkland. But I was there, and all of a sudden, all of these busloads of kids came from, in the days following that horrible shooting in Parkland. And then they were joined by all these college students. So it was thousands of kids that joined in front of that Capitol that I really, along with that just memorable speech of Emma Gonzalez, who had the gumption to within days just go with her heart in her hands, full of trauma, and speaking on behalf of a lot of her fallen schoolmates and friends, give that unbelievable We Call BS speech. So those two things together for me were kind of the birth of a youth movement that has inspired an entire globe of kids around a whole intersectional number of issues. And Us Kids is really, to me, about that spark and what happened after, and the youth movement that has grown up and continues to flourish and grow even stronger. But in terms of pivoting, there was a little period there where I thought, is it all one story? Is it a series? I happened to be on my way to LA. I had this footage of the first days after. I thought, this is crazy. I made Newtown. People said, you kind of have to do this. And there were some other, I'm not that new agey, but there were like other bizarre things that happened in that week that were just like, okay, I have to do this. And the truth of it is, I had left the Newtown story with one burning feeling that I wasn't done with which had to do with traumatized kids across America. that you're left in the wake of Newtown and, you know, Black and brown communities that have been fighting this for years and don't get the attention all over the country, of kids that are traumatized by gun violence. And what about those hundreds of thousands of kids? So that had been in me for a couple of years. I knew a lot of the families and still do in Newtown really closely. And when Parkland happened and I saw all of these tear-ridden high school students come, I thought, this is that primal cry of, we are traumatized, we are angry, we have rage, and then everyone knew there was something different here, that they were going to do what young people have done since the beginning of time, a certain portion of them, which is to have the courage to turn all of that into action and ultimately hope. So I see the film as completely different than Newtown. Newtown was a gut punch treatise on grief. A lot of it was adult grief. This is all kids and ultimately is about change and hope.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that really particularly moved me about the film is near the end of the film, when you reveal the exhaustion that the students had been kind of holding at bay with all of their activism and their propelling forward, and dealing with their grief, and that the moment of how do they participate in self-care, at that point, like, on a very individual basis. So I'm wondering, there's an age-old question about documentarians, like when you're filming someone that's undergoing this kind of suffering, where do you as a filmmaker help or talk to them about it, or do you just sit back and let that all happen? Can you talk about those moments that you're so beautifully able to capture?
Yeah, thanks. The truth of it is that I went into it like a lot of Americans. I mean, I had the history of having made Newtown, so I had some experience of understanding a traumatized community pretty well. I'm certainly not a clinical expert, but you learn a lot. And what I didn't have experience with was working with teenagers. That was new and very exciting, challenging at times, but ultimately now like one of the most rewarding things in terms of filmmaking I've ever done. And early on, one of my producing partners said, what's your goal? And I said, I want young people their age to want to see it. And I want it to be authentic to them. So I caught on really quickly. I was reticent to get involved because they were just being, as you learn in the film, and we know they were being, a lot of them were being just glommed on by a lot of press, and they were just sort of celebritized overnight, as often happens in our culture. So when I started traveling with them across the country, there was tons of cameras and media. And with Emma and David and some of the higher profile kids, I just felt badly for them. I saw their exhaustion because I did walk the walk. I did do almost 50 cities with them, chasing that darn bus. I can't tell you how many stories of, driving, like, I shouldn't admit it, like I didn't do it. One of my colleagues, like, hitting over 110 miles an hour somewhere in the Southwest because there's the bus, and we somehow lost it. But, it was grueling. It was grueling for everyone. It was a lot of bad food, and I watched these kids just grind it out day after day. And they were determined to talk to people across the country, learn their facts, get the sleep that they could. These were not kids that were doing anything remotely like what I was doing after my junior and senior year. So with those kids, I did sit back a lot and then got to know them better after the tour, because I knew that at the end of the day, if I was one more interviewer going up to Emma or David or a number of people, it was just sort of like I would have gotten the same, and they needed to understand I was part of them. And I think they did, and they certainly do now. I'm working very collaboratively with them for the release of the film. With Sam, she represents something which is sort of a different kind of trauma because she was shot herself. And we just developed a very intimate rapport where I was able to glean that this was cathartic for her. This was, but all of them all of them had to do it on their own terms. And I think there was an unspoken rule. I never ever said it to Em or anyone, but if you said anything like, what about, if you ever got to know, I would never ask twice. And I usually wouldn't even ask once. I would just say, what do you think? What do you think if we were to do this? Do you think that would be interesting? Do you think that's worth exploring? So that kind of mutual respect is what builds trust with any subject. With young people, I think even more, they had even more reason to be distrustful. So I think it was, these things show on screen. They have to be authentic and real. People have to really believe you, and they have to believe that you have their best welfare at heart. And there were many moments where I stopped filming because it was like, Sam's not okay. Let's cut. Or, and they saw that. Or I'm not going to approach Emma. She looks way too exhausted. So it was like that. And it was staying in for 2 years. That's what the hard work of documentary. It's not even that you want to be sanctimonious and save the mainstream media. They just have their constraints. They have 3 minutes to turn out something with, come in, put up all the lights. And sometimes I sacrificed aesthetic things a lot because I knew that if I set up a whole room of lights and stuff, that alone would be a kind of trigger of like, oh, this again. Mm-hmm. It had to be very intimate and casual. Pajamas sometimes.
Right. So, I mean, the other thing that's really impressive and surprising is kind of how media savvy the kids were almost naturally. Like they were able, I mean, certainly they were learning as they were going along, but they had really good instincts. I mean, instincts that I would not have imagined myself having. What's different about this generation and being saturated with media? Did that somehow make them more equipped to deal with it, with all of that you just described?
Yeah, like you, I learned a lot about how media savvy. I've said to a few of them, gosh, if I had learned to know how to say no and be very clear at this age, let alone that age, about what I can and can't do, how amazing is that? I remember Jimmy Fallon came to their graduation and his punchline at some point was welcome to opposite day. And you felt that a lot. You felt like Home Alone movie or something where, the kids have taken the reins and most of the time for good. They are better at social media. They have grown up on the internet. And to your point about the media, they're growing up in an information age that they understand all too well why to be discerning, how to find the music they want to find that's not just being fed to them through 5 corporate-owned places. They pride themselves on that. So with media, like Cameron would once say to me, oh, well, I went to like 30 sources. I mean, they vet stuff because they're, unlike my mother's generation, that, I had to explain to her at one point what a blog was, who knew 3 trusted newspapers, right? They've grown up where they have a gazillion sources and have to really be discerning, and the more inquisitive, curious, and intelligent a person is growing up in this age, the more they want to be able to come to their own opinion and how they trust their information. Mm-hmm. and how they trust who they're dealing with. I mean, also, I just think kids in general that age, I certainly knew this about myself, their BS meter is really highly honed. I think we lose it as we get older, but they know right away when someone's full of shit.
Mhm.
They just do. And that's part of it, is that, and it's like dogs, you know. You know, dogs know right away when you love them, and
If
they're
you're afraid of them.
yeah, they know that, and it's they're much more in tune with their intuitive. Um, I think we tend to lose trust in those in instincts, and
Mhm.
that's partly why I think youth movements are so powerful, because they have nothing to lose, and that courage and that gumption and that trusting of instincts. It's like, yeah, I just know this. Now with it comes some arrogance, because they don't have the experience of years, but you know, for the most part, most of the time was like, yeah, they got this done, they're right.
Sure, sure. So, tell me about how are they engaged in this current moment? I know we were talking a few minutes before we began the conversation about what's coming next for the film. Could you tell us what you've got planned?
Yes. So we premiered at Sundance, and then, like a lot of filmmakers, we've been pivoting in the crazy COVID times. We teamed up with March for Our Lives, and we did a whole number of drive-ins across the country in strategic states where they did art activations that had to do with voter reg, and they've pivoted very beautifully. I wouldn't even say pivoted; it's the wrong word, because they were. They were woke enough and looking ahead enough, even before COVID and Black Lives Matter. You know, the whole end of the film, if people stayed through the credits, is Emma saying, you know, everything's connected to everything, dude. And I think they understand intersectionality in a way that my generation didn't. So they were making the connections from the day one between gun violence and racial justice. That was so important. That's why Alex connected up uh, so quickly and through their power of social media with Alex King in Chicago, and they got together. And so the whole early beginnings were not at all, dare I say, in a way the media portrayed it, as kind of these, you know, this group of kids. It was a whole movement that sprang up that did have inclusion and diversity. You saw it on the stage in the on March 24th back then. So that's continued, and in the release of the film, we've not only incorporated that, but I know March for Our Lives has been really just so authentic, and taking the lead of the kids to make all of those connections that go way beyond gun violence, that are so concerned with Black Lives Matter and racial justice and COVID related things and all kinds of other things. So there's a line in the movie where David says, "Vote today for policies that won't get you killed tomorrow." And I think, you know, at the time, certainly there was a focus on gun violence, which propelled them to set out on their mission. But I think now it can pertain to anything. It's, you know, don't vote red or blue. You know, don't. This is not. You know, they will constantly say this is not bipartisan. This isn't even political. It's certainly with guns a public health epidemic, and as is COVID, which has also been politicized. So they would say vote according to the issues. Be concerned with down ballot. Be smart. And I stand with them in, you know, we got on a Zoom and I said, do you think it's important? I don't want to assume anything, that this film, that we use it in these critical times to try and turn out the youth vote. And they all agreed, yes, we agree that that's important. So that's what we're doing. We're using this very critical time in the country to do that. And I am on Zoom and collaborating with them. And to that end, we are about to announce officially, you'll get it first, a release of the film on the weekend of October 24th. So if you follow uskidsfilm.com, we'll be partnering with a number of amazing groups to not only offer a window of the film for free for kids across America to share. We ask people if they're inspired, having seen the film here at Miami Gems, to tell people to see it, because we need that. We need kids to be telling kids, and that's what they seem to be wanting to do with it. So we will have a virtual live event with some very exciting celebrities that have conversation with our kids, but organically so. People who really are walking the walk, with some musical performances that are surprises and clips from our film that will tease after the event the release of the film, and then we'll be releasing it as sort of a virtual theatrical thing. So there's a whole number of things that start on the 24th to get out the youth vote and make it an unprecedented turnout for the youth vote that leads up to Election Day. We think we all agree it's part of preserving democracy right now, and especially in your state where we started, as goes Florida.
That's right. That's right. Kim, I just want to thank you again for sharing your story with us. And this film, there's been many films made about Parkland. They're all moving. They're all important. They're all different. Your film just inspired so much heartfelt love and feeling for these kids. I learned so much that was beyond the headlines, and I just admire so much the accomplishment. I'm so grateful we're able to share it with our audience at Miami Film Festival Gems. So
thank you so much for having me here. I'm so glad, even if virtually, to have been a part of Miami, and definitely stay tuned and watch for the film's release.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you, Kim. Good luck with everything.
Thank you. Thank you so much.